responsibility. So that's what's going to decide it there. Can they stay on the field and convert on third down? And I don't care how they're doing it, and quite honestly, with this football team, although I prefer them to be more balanced, I just want to see them sustain drives, because when you sustain drives, that takes time off the clock, keeps Patrick on the sideline. They need to be good on third down and then score, because you know Kansas City is going to score. They always turn it up at this time of year. They're going to score. So he has to be efficient in that way. If they aren't, they lose. If they are, Buffalo can wind up pulling this up.
You don't get a bad matchup no matter what ends up happening. Lewis, you are the best. Thank you. Enjoy the games this weekend. I'll see you next week.
You got it, my man. See you.
That's Louis Riddick with me again. He's looking at Chicago. I think there's a couple of different ways to look at this, and if I seem obsessed with the Deshaun Watson thing, you will have to excuse me. But, there are two kinds of teams in the NFL. There are ones who have quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson, and then the ones who would give anything to have them. And I mean literally anything. And so I remain obsessed with that. And he's looking at Chicago, and I get it. I mean, it's easy to see why the Bears would want that. Frankly, it's hard to picture more than about 5 or 6 teams that wouldn't give anything to have Deshaun Watson. It's difficult to figure out the other two pieces of that. What is it they're giving Houston that will make the Texans feel good? And what is it Deshaun is looking at and saying, yes, that's a really attractive option for me relative to some of the others that are out there? The best thing the Bears have going for them is that they're in the NFC. I think if I'm Houston, if I ultimately get to a place where I have no choice but to trade Deshaun, I might say to him, look, I get that you control this thing to some degree, but can we find an NFC destination for you? There's no way you trade into the Colts. I don't care what happens. You can't trade him in your division. You just can't do that. And I would try very hard not to even keep him in the conference. You don't want to be losing playoff games to Deshaun Watson for the next decade. So if I'm Houston, I'm trying as hard as I can to get him to the NFC. I guess that is what the Bears have going for them more than the Colts or the Jets or some of the other teams that you hear regularly in this. It's going to be fascinating to watch. And Deshaun Watson wants to make sure he doesn't someday wind up on the green list of the greatest quarterbacks never to win the Super Bowl. Speaking of which,
the list is what determines who matters in this business.
All right, so sorry, I talked over it. Bubba's going to yell at me again. The green list today is a great one, inspired by Phillip Rivers, who yesterday retired after 17 sensational seasons. Nuno and I sat down. This is a tough one. This was a very tough one to do. And as I give you the top 5 quarterbacks of the Super Bowl era to never win the Super Bowl, I will then give you the 3 names that we debated the most putting onto the list. But quickly, because we did it earlier.
Number 5.
Number 5 is Warren Moon, and I almost feel bad even putting him at 5 because he deserves to be higher. Warren Moon deserves to be higher. Warren Moon's career is in some ways a very sad story. Warren Moon basically wasn't allowed to come play in the NFL because at that time we just didn't have black quarterbacks. It's a disgrace, frankly. And he wound up having to go to the Canadian Football League where he just set the league on fire, just was unstoppable in the CFL, and then finally made his way to the NFL, where he led the league in passing twice and was the league MVP once, and his 12th all-time in yards as it is. Warren Moon was so good, so good. It's really a terrible story that he didn't get to come right into the NFL in a different generation. If he was 20 years younger, Warren Moon would be way higher on this list. Although, who knows, maybe he would have won multiple Super Bowls. Pardon me, he was that good. But one way or another, I couldn't do the list without him. Warren Moon is number 5 on the list of the best quarterbacks never to win the Super Bowl.
Number 4.
At number 4, I put Phillip Rivers. I think Rivers deserves to be on the list. Unbelievable career. 5th all-time in passing, 5th all-time in touchdown passes. Just no postseason success. Not just no Super Bowls, but no postseason success is the reason he is behind the other people is behind on this list. But he had a great career, first ballot Hall of Fame in my opinion, and he is 4 on the list.
Number 3
is Franz Harkington. Franz Harkington, I think, is a largely forgotten player. Now, Franz Harkington was a terrific player. The 70s were a great era for pro football. Franz Harkington led the Vikings to 3 Super Bowls. Didn't win any of them. They ran into great teams. They ran into the Steelers, and they ran into the Raiders. And who beat them in the Dolphins, the greasy Dolphins. So the Bob Greasy Dolphins, so he made 3 Super Bowls. He was the league MVP one year. He was 9-time Pro Bowler, and he really revolutionized the position. They called him the Mad Scrambler because he ran around at a time when quarterbacks didn't run around. So Tarkenton is an all-time great player. And when people talk about the 70s, they talk about Bradshaw and Staubach because they won Super Bowls. Between them, Bradshaw and Staubach won 6 Super Bowls. Stabler won 1, and he was a great player. Tarkenton was a great player. He's number 3 on today's list. Best quarterbacks never to win the Super Bowl.
Number 2.
Jim Kelly is 2. 4 straight Super Bowls with the Bills. Another one who didn't go right to the NFL. That was a different circumstance. He chose to go to the USFL, the Houston Gamblers, if I remember correctly, when he first got out of college at the U. Great college player. Once he got to the NFL, he was the leader of, one of the greatest teams of all time. I think we have to call the Bills that. I know they didn't win any of them, but they made 4 straight Super Bowls. No one's ever done that before or since. And he absolutely belongs on this. He was the leader of one of the great teams ever. So Jim is number 2 on the list, and number 1 is easy.
Number 1.
When we started doing the list, the first thing I did was write down number 1 is Dan Marino, and then I started figuring out who comes after that. And for anyone who is not old enough to have seen Marino play, and you say to yourself, other guys put up bigger numbers, and I just trust me. To watch Dan Marino play was like to watch Picasso paint in person. To watch Mozart sit down at the piano and just start tinkling with the keys. Dan Marino was so beautiful to watch throw a football it could bring tears to your eyes. And I've never hated anyone like I hated him because he was the quarterback of the Dolphins. I mean that in the purest sports way. He's a delightful man. I've gotten to know him since. But he was the Jets' arch rival. I never feared anyone like I feared him. I feared Marino as the rival. Like, if you ever want to find out how good a player is, ask the rival. That's who really knows. So, Marino I feared more than I feared Brady. I was more afraid of Marino than I was of Brady as a fan. I'll tell you that right now. Marino was, but when he retired, he had every record that there was. They've all since been surpassed. But Marino, everyone who watched him play is nodding. There's no question. He is the best quarterback of the Super Bowl era, never to win a Super Bowl. And those are the top 5 from today's green list. Let me quickly share, because a lot of people are sending in suggestions for names that we left out, because this was tough. Nuno and I spent some time on this today. So the 3 names that we have here, or at least the first 2, are Donovan McNabb and Dan Fouts. I loved Fouts. Fouts and that Air Coryell Chargers, I loved watching them play. And they were awesome. And they never got to a Super Bowl. They got bad luck. After they won maybe the greatest football game ever played, the legendary game against the Dolphins, the Kellen Winslow game, the hook and ladder game, all of that. After they won that game, they went to Cincinnati. And do you remember what happened to them in Cincinnati? It was negative 59 with the wind chill. They played the Bengals at Riverfront, and with the wind chill, the temperature was negative 59. Is the second coldest game in the history of pro football, second only to the Ice Bowl. And they had no chance. If you've ever seen the pictures or the video of Dan Fouts in that game, you've never seen a person who wanted to play a football game less than that. Fouts is a West Coast guy, imagine you're playing in San Diego, now you show up in Cincinnati and it's negative 59. So if Fouts had gotten to a Super Bowl, we might remember him more. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a great player. I couldn't put him ahead of any of these guys. I wanted to. I really did. I grew up loving watching Dan Fouts play. And those teams were so good, and they were ahead of their time, the Coryell teams. But I couldn't put him ahead of any of these guys. Another is McNabb. McNabb, I think, has short shrift. Donovan, he was not beloved by his own fans at times, I guess because he never made it. He made 5 NFC Championship games, 4 straight NFC Championship game appearances, got to a Super Bowl, put up huge numbers in Philly. He's not on the list. I don't apologize for not putting him on the list, but his name deserves to be mentioned. And then as we were kicking around some other names, I mean, depending on how you look at it, Michael Vick is an interesting one. Vick is he had an interesting career. So there's a lot of names you could have put on here. Steve McNair was another one that we contemplated, won an MVP award. But in the end, I'm happy with the list. I stand behind the list as the world's foremost authority on all matters. The top 5 quarterbacks of the Super Bowl era, never to win one, are Moon, Rivers, Tarkenton, Kelly, and Dan Marino, number 1. Thanks so much for hanging out today. I had a great time. I hope that you did too. I'll see you back and better than ever first thing tomorrow morning as we get up with you on ESPN for a full-scale Football Friday. And then we'll be right back here, same time, same place on ESPN Radio.